I am Hillary Rogers, and I am pleased to introduce Dr. Camille Kelly. I've known Dr. Kelly for over 14 years and known her to be a champion for children of all abilities as well as the people that care and teach them. Dr. Kelly brings us nearly 30 years of experience in early childhood education, having grown from a teacher assistant to her current role as the administrative coordinator for preschool programs in Prince William County Public Schools, where she supports both Head Start and the Virginia Preschool Initiative. Her journey is deeply rooted in the values and resilience and reflection shaped by a childhood spent in a home where her parents fostered children for over 3 decades. Dr. Kelly is passionate about building professional capacity in educators, fostering collaborative teams that support the whole child, and promoting wellness for all. She earned her PhD from Walden University, where her research focused on strategies to support English learners in preschool. Above all, she is driven by a vision to see every child grow, thrive, and use their unique gifts to change the world. She is also a proud wife of 30 years and mother to 5 dynamic children. Dr. Kelly, thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you all for having me and being willing to sort of walk this journey with us today. So I want to share just a tad bit more about myself. I just feel like I throw my family under the bus with that last line and just like, yeah, they're here. But I think it also sort of speaks to my story. And I am a proud mom. And wife in a blended family. And so I have 4 adult children and 1 teenager. And their ages are 35, 30, 25, and 23. And I have a 16-year-old teenager. And so as you can imagine, just sort of walking through that journey and my with my husband of 30 years, I'm sure you can imagine that just working through that, I often had to tap into my own resilience, just because as a mother who doesn't question what they're doing, but in a blended family, it can be really challenging to ensure that you're meeting the needs of all children that are in your home. And so I feel like that also contributes to the work that I've done, because I was at that same time an AM PM teacher. So I had 36 littles every day. And those 36 littles, I always felt like, okay, do I have enough left for my family when I get home? And so I hope that, our work together today will sort of illustrate not just what I've learned professionally, but what I've learned in my family and just sort of bouncing back and forth as a mom and a wife and trying to honor the needs of my stepson's mother, as well as my own children and our values in our home, but building these really strong children. And I'm happy to say that at least for 4 of them, I have survived those teenage years, which are really super hard. So because you're like, who's this kid? I don't recognize them. But I definitely survived, and I think I learned so much that I'm happy to share with you today. So we're going to talk about those tiny humans. We're going to talk about how how big their strength has to be, and then our role in sort of building their resilience throughout their first 5 years. So I'd like to see who's in the room. Let me see if my mouse, there we go. So I know that we have a few participants here in the room. I'd love to know who you are and what age group you work with, and whether you're a parent or an educator. I'd love to know who you work with. So I'll give you a second to share that. See, I don't know if I can see that. Okay, well, I feel like well, we're definitely going to be talking about all age levels from 0 to 5. So even if you don't share, you're certainly, hopefully you'll pull something from this that is meaningful to you. Okay, so today we're going to really be focused on four things greatly. So we're going to go in and we're going to define resilience. I want you to know exactly what that is. We're going to look at some key things that help build resilience. We're going to look at those things that can really challenge the ability to build that strength and that resilience in a child. And also we're going to talk about the value of early caregivers in this work. Well, there it is. My computer doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know whether to go forward or backward or what, but we're going to figure it out. Okay, so resilience by definition is really the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulty. It's really about thriving despite any challenges that may come up in a child's life. We know that, or anyone's life, really, this even goes through adults. So it's really about what you do when something really hard comes up and how you move through that. This is really an important skill that happens in a child's future. So what we're doing now really builds them to becoming just a well-adjusted adult, well-adjusted teen. And so this resilience piece is so important because it's really about their bounce. How do I bounce back from the things that happen in my life? So what is the impact of early childhood? I really want you to know how important those first 5 years are in what we do with children. The first 5 years, it's a period of rapid development. Children are really pulling in, children are really absorbing what's happening around them. Their synapses are firing, those neurons, they're being built very quickly, and they can really, this time can really make, break, or sort of have children on that midline, that median, um, based on the work that we do as adults to support them. So this is a really great period, just like when they're learning, their sounds, their letters, their development. This is when we see the biggest growth. We also see the biggest growth when building resilience during those first 5 years. And children are so sensitive to their surroundings and their experiences. It may not seem like they are. A lot of times I will hear adults say, well, they don't know what's going on. They may not know exactly what's going on in the way that we do, but they do absorb and feel those experiences. And so they are aware in some way, whether they feel it physiologically or whether they actually do know what's going on. They're very sensitive to their surroundings and experiences. And when I think about this, I like to share a story of a family that I was told about actually in a training similar to this. And it was a story about three children in a household that was a challenging household. It was quite chaotic. And those children, there was a school ager, there was a toddler, and there was an infant. And during this chaos, this difficult household, the one of the parents killed the other parent and then themselves. And when help came, the school ager was playing video games, sitting down playing video games, despite what had happened around him. So we can infer things from that. But the toddler was crying, very upset, and the infant was actually in the crib and asleep by the time the authorities came. But as they followed these children through their lives, it was shocking to me to learn that the infant was the one that had the most difficulty. And I think that that speaks volumes about what babies, infants do absorb, what children do absorb in their body. And so that's why it's so important for us to work from our end as adults to support children in building those skills around resilience. So that story tells us that positive environments can enhance resilience and adverse experiences can hinder resilience. Um, that story shares a lot about what could happen, but we know in the work that I do here, I see a lot of different things and I can conclude a lot of things, but the research shows us that children are very sensitive and that we have to do the work to support them. So let's talk a little bit about the enemy of resilience. What exactly is the enemy of resilience? I want you to take a look at this graphic and I want you to notice these three key things here. The lack of caregiver support, a chaotic environment. The graphic shows us that there's just a lot happening. But what's actually happening in the child's brain is equally as important. So there's both natural and there's external influences that impact the ability for children to come back from difficult situations and to come back in an appropriate way. Um, we know that environmental factors can impact children negatively, including that chaotic household, as I said. It could be dysfunction, it could be abuse or neglect, it could be exposure to trauma, especially if that trauma exposure happens chronically. It could even be loss or separation. These things can impact the development of the brain, and that disruptive life can impact that sense of calm. And so that hippocampus, which is here in the back, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but that bottom orange piece, that hippocampus can actually shrink when there is that chronic nature of chaos or perhaps upset in a home or in any environment, including an early care environment. It can actually shrink. And that hippocampus is really important because it builds that memory, it helps with that regulation, and it can actually shrink. And in the front, we have this overactive emotion and fear that could come up for children when that part of the brain is triggered. And so the enemy of resilience is that chronic exposure to stress. The consequence is that underdeveloped or undeveloped coping skills. That's what happens. Now, there's also poor self-esteem. If a child feels worthless or a child is treated in such a way that their self-esteem is impacted in a negative way, then that can also dysregulate the brain. And then there's societal negativity. I mean, let's be honest, right now in our society, I think we probably say this, I've probably said this 1,000 times in 1,000 ways, 1,000 different periods during my life, but there's a lot of negativity out there, and a lot of easily accessible negativity with social media and things sort of being at our fingertips. And if children take that in and they believe that to be who they are, that can also impact the regulation of their brain in early childhood. And then there is that small percentage of children who actually have a natural temperament that may sort of lend itself to the struggle to become a resilient human in the end. And so we want to keep that in mind. But the protective factors that you'll hear me talk about a little bit later, in these scenarios, it's interrupted or it's infrequent. There is not enough of the good stuff to build that bounce, that resilience, coming back from the thing that is happening in their life. So now that we know, and by the way, if anyone has questions, you're welcome to throw them in the chat. You're welcome to just unmute and ask those questions. I'm easy and I love a good conversation. So please feel free to do that should you want to. Um, but now that we know a little bit about what the enemy of resilience is, let's talk about building that brain. I want you to know that in building their brain, there are these protective factors that impact brain development. I just told you what the enemy of them could be. Now let's talk about what actually is here. So we're looking at the prefrontal cortex, which is right in the front of their brain. And this part is so powerful. It is responsible for decision making. It's responsible for self-regulation. It actually is strengthened by consistent routines and responsive caregiving. And Dr. Becky Bailey, who is the author of Conscious Discipline, she says that this front part of their brain, that prefrontal cortex, is where they can access their brilliance because all the other stuff is out of the way and they can make a good decision. And then we have the amygdala, which processes emotion. And that's really important because here's the opportunity for kids to actually know what they're feeling and being able to name what they're feeling. But this amygdala is responsible, it processes emotions like fear, like anxiety. It's even responsible for some of the mental concerns or disorders that may be out there. Here's where it lies. Here's where that piece of how we develop comes about. And then the hippocampus, which we talked about already, is very important for memory and learning. And remember, I said that if it is stressed, it can actually shrink. And that is never the outcome that we want. But it thrives in environments where there's rich language, where there's play, where there's exploration. In other words, places where kids get to be kids. This is where that hippocampus starts to sort of be built. And those things come about through the secure relationships, through emotional regulation. That's how we build these protective factors. That's what those are called, those secure relationships, that opportunity to regulate emotionally. These are protective factors that help regulate a child's response to stress. That's the same thing we have as adults. I mean, the honest truth is we as adults also respond to stress in various ways. But if we have these protective, or we grew up with these protective factors or develop them later, because the reality is sometimes we have to learn these things a little bit later depending on our life circumstances. If we have these things, then it reduces those harmful cortisol levels and it builds and promotes that healthy brain development. And then when there are nurturing relationships and positive experiences, it's not just about feeling good. It's about building a powerful brain that allows children to pull themselves back from challenging situations. So I know that it's easier said than done. I can tell you anything I want today, but I hope that by the end you'll have some things in practice that you can actually do as a caregiver in order to truly do the work to support children. So how do we get there? So I have this graphic that you're going to see me build upon. This, I call it a 6-pack. There are 6 words that I hope will sort of pop up in your memory as you work towards supporting little people in building their resilience. And the first one is connection. Really building strong, supportive relationships, and they provide security and confidence. So you can build those relationships in how you interact with your children, your personal children, your children in your care, building those relationships and having a true connection with them. So self-esteem, we're talking about not just offering encouragement, but celebrating and celebrating their successes, celebrating who they are. It's about giving them the chance to succeed also. So it's not just about saying, way to go. It's about giving them the opportunities to practice things and giving them the chance to actually intrinsically inside of themselves build their own self-esteem. So these six important pieces that you're going to see me continue to build upon, I hope you'll see a pattern of creating a child who is able to bounce back based on these things. So the next two are about being a community member and having healthy habits. So what is a community member? Community member is really about being a part of the family at home. What can they do to feel like they have a sense of belonging, like they're supposed to be there? Like, this is my space as well, that I'm important in this world. Same thing in the classroom. What can you do to support children in feeling like this is your school home? This is part of your environment too, that we collectively are part of this world. So if you have jobs in your classroom, way to go. That's step number one. You've got something down there. You can do that at home too. You can think about, what can they help with? Can they scoop the dog food into the bowl when it's time for the dog to eat? Could they add the forks or even set the table in some way? In the classroom, can they be the light helper? Can they be the line leader? Can they be the ball carrier to take the balls out to the playground? What can they do that helps them feel a part of the community? That's also part of building resilience, because it's really about helping them feel self-assured and have a sense of belonging. Also, healthy habits. I think this one is the one that is the most challenging when I work with families and when I work with parents. A lot of times they'll say things like, oh, they go to bed whenever they go to bed. Like, I can't do the fight. They go to bed whenever they can. I will encourage you. We know that in early care centers, typically there is a nap time or a rest time in some way. Don't skip it. Resting is equally as important as everything else I'm about to tell you to this experience, because resting also gives them the opportunity to build energy that they need to make it through the day. So have a bedtime and make sure that if there is an opportunity to rest during the day, especially in those 0 to 5 years, they should get the chance to rest. But it's not just about rest. It's also about meals. Try very hard to ensure that children's meals are balanced. If you're in an environment such as mine here in the work that I do, children are allowed to pack their lunch or purchase their lunch or purchase their lunch from school. So they have those two options. And sometimes when lunch comes from home, I'm sure you can imagine that I'll be like, oh my goodness, what is that? So we try really hard to educate families, and I encourage you, if that's within your capacity to do that, to educate families about the importance of healthy habits. Because again, trying new foods that are healthy and having those healthy meals, it builds that energy, that capacity. It helps children feel whole. That's very important. And of course, movement. Get out there, have them go run, play, climb, recess, whatever that is. Those things are just as important to building their resilience, because again, all of those things that I mentioned, meals, movement, sleep, those things help build that energy and that capacity. I'm sure, we're adults on here. I can tell you right now, last week I was in a situation where I was running all over the place. Something was going on with a family member. I was exhausted. And I remember thinking, you're just a tenth of yourself. because I was just trying so hard to keep up and I just wasn't myself. I was grabbing, muffins, things on the go, and I just wasn't myself. That impacted my ability to sort of navigate the way I wanted to. Same thing happens to kids. So healthy habits, community member, the next two in that six pack. And the last two in the six pack are safety and calming strategies. So feeling that sense of safety involves having a calm, secure environment, and it gives the opportunity for children to be a part of the community, but feel like they can problem solve. So imagine if you were in a chaotic environment that didn't feel safe to you at all. You're always in fight or flight. Your hippocampus is shrinking. You are in a place of, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And when you're in that place, it is very difficult to make a good decision, to access your brilliance in that prefrontal cortex. So that sense of a safe, secure, calm, consistent environment, that's big. So safety gives the chance for them to be independent. When you're afraid, being independent is not the first thing on your mind. It's not the thing that's taught to you. So safety gives you that opportunity to access your brilliance and problem solve, as well as feel independent. And then calming strategies. Boy, that's a big one. Emotional regulation is a big one that we want to make sure that we are really being intentional about, because it's about understanding their emotions in order to manage them. That one is so important that I really want to spend a little bit more time on that. That emotional regulation piece, I'm sure you're hearing a lot about. It's something that we know kids need and that we're talking about constantly, but how do you do it? A lot of times we don't know how to support children in calming. That's part of that building resilience. If you understand how to calm, if you understand your emotions, you can bounce back. So I want you to just consider, you're welcome if you're in the room to type in the chat something that you want to share, or you are welcome to unmute and share. I really want you to consider. Think about a time when you helped a child through a tough moment. How did you help them? What did you do to navigate that? I want you to just think about that for a second. Yeah, I hope you have something in your mind. So this is really the crux of the matter when we're building resilience. It's really so important that we think about how we help children navigate hard things, because it helps to build resilience. And if you ask me, there's this and there's one other piece that we'll talk about a little bit later that I feel are the biggest bang for your buck if you work through how you support children. And, I want you to know that as we move into emotional regulation for a second, I want you to know that what I'm going to tell you and what I am telling you, some of this is typical 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 2-year-old behavior. Some kids are going to have tantrums. They're going to cry when their needs are not met. They're going to, scream, shout. They might throw a toy on the floor. They might even knock something down. Some of this stuff is typical 0 to 5 behavior, but it is the work that we do in the moment that supports building that resilience in a child so that they can bounce back from those issues. So I don't want you to think that I'm giving you a magic wand that if I do this, this will never happen. No, I hate to break it to you. It's probably going to happen, but it's really about how we move through. Okay, thank you, Ginger, for sharing your thoughts. She was saying that After reassurance wasn't working, she told them to go she was going to sit with them until they felt more calm. Once I stopped talking, they began to slowly regulate. Oh boy, she just hit something on the head, Ginger, because that is one of the things that I think is important. And we forget that like I'm doing now, I'm running my mouth. But a lot of times when we talk through it, it's very difficult for children to find their calm. But here are some things um, that I want you to keep in mind. I want you to practice calming strategies. It needs to be a deliberate practice in your early care work. Whether you're a parent, whether you are an early care educator, it is important that it is actually part of the work that you do with children, regardless of their age. Here in Prince William County, we actually require teachers to have calming strategies as part of their routine. So we want them to do it early in the morning as a practice skill, but then throughout the day wherever it makes sense. And so one of the things that I've learned in my work over the years in working with um, strategies that support calm is that whatever you decide to do, you want to do it 3 times. So if you're going to do, the give me 5, where you take a deep breath in as you move your finger and you blow it out as you go back, or you want to do a big breath like this, whatever it is you want to do, sometimes the teachers turn it into the things like a dinosaur squeeze as hard as they can and they let go, whatever it may be. You want to do that 3 times. Research says that 3 times will clear those sort of clouds in their brain and allow them the opportunity to think through and to be able to access their brilliance. We got to get all that stuff out of the way in order for them to be able to do that. And these first 5 years are critical for you to do this. Now, I'm going to tell you something that, for my personal life, that might help you a little bit. So in my home, my 30-year-old, my 26-year-old, and my 23-year-old, and my 16-year-old were raised in my home. My stepson was raised mostly in New York. My children that were raised in my home were what you would call good kids, meaning they really didn't have anything that I needed to correct or support all the time. I feel like our household was a calm household. We had rules in place. They were definitely community members, but it was few and far between where I had to actually do something to support them in upset. But I learned 2 things. First of all, that second child, ooh, baby, they can really wear you out. And she did. She was my tantrumer. So she was the one I had to do the most work with. But I thought I was doing the right thing by simply walking away from her tantrum. But I didn't use that time to teach her how to calm. And I saw the effects of that when she was a teenager. That's when it popped up. I didn't see it through the remainder of her preschool years, elementary, middle. I saw it in high school. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought, what did I screw up? I messed something up really, really bad that my daughter is losing her mind all the time. And what I realized was back then, when I had the opportunity to teach these calming strategies, I didn't do it. That's number 1. Number 2, my oldest child was very quiet. She was one of these kids who's, super duper smart. She knew things that I would be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Let's go look it up. But when she got upset, she got quiet. And I thought, okay, well, let her work it out. I might say, if you want to talk to mommy, mommy's here, but I didn't really do anything. And although it didn't show up in a negative way later on, I do sometimes wonder, even though she's 30, is it going to show up because I didn't teach her those strategies then. So, I know I'm beating up on myself really good, but I'm saying that to let you know that the child who makes a lot of noise is equally as important as the child that doesn't. You've got to try to intentionally support those calming strategies so that they have those strategies as they move on. And my son, who is 23, really, he was the baby for a long time, and he never nothing ever happened. But again, because I didn't intentionally teach those practices, I saw his upset as a teenager and was like, how did this happen? And it was, him, if he couldn't find his charger, would lose his mind. And I thought, what in the world is going on? But I recognized it as my lack of teaching these skills. I know this now. I didn't know this then. So I forgive myself. So forgive yourself if that's what you're thinking right now. But that is an important factor that I want you to keep in mind. Every child, no matter how they handle dysregulation, really needs to be effectively taught these calming strategies, whatever you decide they are. Just remember that 3 breaths, whatever that is, whether you do it in a funny way, a silly way, a serious way, the same way every time, 3 times they need those breaths. And then intentionally naming and teaching the emotions. It is very hard for you as an early care educator to support a child when you don't even know what they're going through, when you don't know what it is they want. How many times have you said, I know you're really mad, and they weren't mad at all, or I know you're sad, and when actually they were frustrated, that was what it was, or they were mad. And we're giving them these names, which there's nothing wrong with that. You can certainly give them those names because they don't have them yet. But imagine the change if you were able to intentionally name the emotions by holding up an angry face, practicing what that angry face looks like, and talking about what that feels like through story, through however you decide to teach that. But naming those emotions and directly and intentionally teaching them about what that feels like, it also supports their recovery from that tough situation. And co-regulation. Co-regulation is really about sitting with them in it. And Ginger, you hit the nail on the head. You said, I'm going to come and sit with you, and I'm going to go over and help you calm. And that was such a great idea, because children this young really need you to be a partner in that regulation. And I'm going to give you an example for this one as well. 2 examples, one with an adult and one with a child. My sister has 2 children, one is 4 and one is 2. And when the 4-year-old was a baby, my sister was like, listen, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but the baby is crying all the time. And you could see her become frazzled and sort of a little bit of a mess. And me having done this, I jumped right in with my teacher instinct, because you know what? I was not the parent in that situation. And so I took her, and or Julian who was the baby at the time. And I was quiet, Ginger, just like you said. And I just rubbed his back. I did not say a word. He can't hear me anyway. He's screaming at the top of his lungs. He's not paying attention to what I'm saying. He is right now struggling through this moment. And so all I did was sit quietly, didn't say a word. And because I was calm, Julian sensed my calm, and Julian became calm too. I'm telling you, if you haven't tried it, it works. He's not the only child I've ever done that on. But once he was calm, I was able to say, you're safe. TT has you. Look, mommy's right there. You're safe. But I didn't say anything while he was screaming because he wasn't listening anyway. So, try to keep that in mind. The other example was just recently. My sister had a major surgery, I was in the hospital with her. She was intubated. And when they wanted her to breathe on her own and take the tube out, she was agitated, and that's because you have a tube down your throat. I was holding her hand, and although moments before that, I thought, oh my goodness, my fight or flight kicked in because seeing her like that scared me. I held her hand and I just rubbed the back of her hand and I said, deep breaths in and out slowly. And I tried hard to calm her. And even in that moment where she was struggling, she had moments of struggle still, but I continued my calm and I could physically see her body change. Same thing happens with kids. When you sit with them and you hold their hands while they're in upset, or you sit next to them while they're in upset and you are breathing and you are calm, guess what will happen with them? So I want you to keep in mind that you have to be an important part of that practice. And social emotional skills are the biggest bang for your buck when we're talking about building resilience. So bare bones, we've now gone through all of our 6-pack here, but I want to just quickly go over those intentional opportunities to rewire that brain and get that brain ready to bounce back when something happens that feels like the end of the world to them, where you and I might think, okay, calm down. That might be your first thought in your mind. But to them, you remember, they've only been here, sometimes 24 months, sometimes 48 months. It is the end of the world to them. So what do? So remember when we talked about connection, those physical and verbal affection opportunities. Also part of connection is not just your relationship with them, it's also creating play partners. So in class, encourage play partners because building those friendships and relationships promotes connection. Self-esteem, verbally noticing positive attributes and encouraging persistence and celebrating that success. Those pieces are important to building resilience. Calming strategies, we just went all the way through that. So that's calming breaths, but it's not just calming breaths. It could be stretching. It could be a good walk. It could be yoga. It could be just a quiet moment. Whatever that looks like, feels like for them, they need that practice really well in their body. Being a community member, remember to let them contribute to the home or the job, the school. Give them a job and let them contribute to being a part of that community. And then safety, that calm environment that promotes routine, safety, and support. I just want to point out, I want you to remember, I know that in early care environments, we have a routine for children. And so when that routine is disrupted, expect a little bit of shakeup because they really crave that routine and that builds a sense of safety, which ultimately supports their ability to bounce back from tough things. And then of course, as I said earlier, those healthy habits. So movement, sleep, balanced nutrition, those things are also big pieces of this. So what is your role? I cannot emphasize enough the adult first mindset. And what I mean by that is that you, as I shared in my example with my sister and with my nephew, you have to be calm. You have to be the model. So you have to think about yourself first. You cannot lend what you do not have. So if you are upset and dysregulated and frazzled, guess what's going to happen with the children? So you want to make sure that you have harnessed calm. You have harnessed a process, a thought process that might support you in navigating through whatever might be going on. Because the reality is things happen in life and in your early care environment. A child could fall and break their arm. That child is physically hurt. They're probably in a lot of pain. But if you lose your mind, guess what they're going to do? They're going to lose their mind. Doesn't mean they won't cry or be hurt or any of that. It just means that your calm actually is is a model for them. You're a role model for them in building those resilient behaviors. Um, Creating that feeling of a safety, that nurturing and stimulating environment with consistent routines and responsiveness. There is a school of thought that says, let babies cry when they're upset. I would say there might be a place for that. That's not my practice. I would encourage you to go and see about what it is that they need because that builds that sense of safety. Um, Model those behaviors, as I said. When I was a teacher, I remember that there were some times I would think, what happened to my children? Where did they go? These kids are all over the place. And I might feel frustrated. I mean, that's the real, right? That's happened to all of us. Sometimes you feel like, oh my goodness, this day can't end quick enough. What is going on? Especially right before a break. If there was going to be some sort of school break, uh, there was the likelihood of craziness in your classroom was much greater. Um, but sometimes during that time, I would model those calming strategies. And so I might just start to breathe in front of the children. And then I would tell them, Miss Kelly is a little frustrated. I'm going to take my 3 deep breaths. And I would take those breaths and then I would say, feeling better, I was frustrated because things are a little chaotic. Can we get back to cleaning up? So and so, can you go over to this and so and get on with that conversation? But I often had to illustrate that in real life because the real is we get upset. But then sometimes I did it just sort of as an illustration to support children in growing and changing in that area. Encourage those social connections. Your connection with them is just as important as their connection with peers. So ensure that you're encouraging that. Continue to promote those healthy habits and build those emotional skills. But if you take nothing from this slide, please take that you have to be the calm one in this space. So now I just want to share with you a few things that I want you to be proactive about for each age. But I do want you to know that a lot of these crossover. It doesn't matter if you're doing it with a 4-year-old or an infant for a lot of them, but they're good proactive strategies that help build your children's ability to come back from upset. So the first one is that responsive caregiving that I mentioned a slide or two ago. If the children are upset or they need something, don't ignore them. Go to them and be responsive. If a baby is crying, go over there, soothe them. Even if you're doing it quietly, you're not saying anything, that see about their needs. You can play peekaboo or hide and seek toys. Those skills encourage object permanence and it helps build that hippocampus. And then those soothing and predictable routines. As I said before, we crave that in our body. We even do as adults. Sometimes I'm like, wait, you want me to go where? But I was going to go home. That's what I do every day at this time. So I sometimes am a little shaken by the change in routine. So imagine how soothing that is for a baby to have those predictable routines. So predictable nap, predictable feeding time, play routines, those things help regulate that stress that children might experience. And then for toddlers, simple choices. For example, do you want the red cup or the blue cup? Those things help build that decision-making ability, but it also helps them feel more independent. Again, that's making them feel an important part of the community that helps build that resilience. This is a good time to start labeling those emotions and practicing it with them. As an infant, you can certainly label them, but practicing it with a toddler, this is a good time. You look sad and recognize and talk about those emotions. And believe it or not, you thought that you were just doing cleanup songs to get them to clean up, but it actually is helpful. It helps build memory and task completion. That's the opportunity for them to feel successful, to build that self-esteem. There's that repetition, there's that fun. You're building the little person that you want them to be to navigate situations. And then obstacle courses, not only is it a healthy habit because there's that movement piece, but it also supports planning and flexibility and motor coordination, all things that help them feel strong and energetic, that builds that resilience. And then for preschoolers, proactive strategies, that role in pretend play, that enhances that problem solving piece, that enhances the opportunity for empathy and flexible thinking. So you think about a lot of times in housekeeping, the baby is crying, or mommy has to run to the store. Those opportunities help build that executive functioning. And then story sequencing is a fun one because story sequencing actually supports that memory. It's the opportunity for them to retell story and opportunities for that narrative skills. So they're building language too. It's giving them a chance to strengthen that hippocampus. And then start stop games. So like freeze dance or Simon Says or red light, green light, those fun games that we all played when we were kids actually help build that executive functioning. When children are on their phone and they scroll and they scroll and they scroll and they scroll, you take the phone and they lose their mind, it's because they don't understand that things start and stop. These games actually build that executive functioning, helps them come back because things are going to stop in life. You're going to have to stop playing that game because we have to get to the grocery store or to church or to school. You're going to have to stop doing that because it's bedtime. Well, we're going to have to start doing this because it's time to do this during the day. These opportunities for them to understand that, we can do those through games. And that helps them bounce back from those times that may feel challenging. And then, of course, having them help with tasks like, watering your classroom plants or setting the table or, carrying the balls outside, whatever it may be, that sense of community is built. So those are hopefully some practical things that you can actually do. And as my time is winding down here, I just want to remind you about what we talked about, what we shared in the beginning. That resilience is built through relationships, through who they think they are, that self-esteem piece, and by having the opportunity to build those skills. When we have that opportunity, we have this lovely recipe of nurturing relationships, skill building activities, and strong, consistent emotional support in practice, then that brain gets the opportunity to build and strengthen the skills that we need to become resilient, not just children, but as we move into adulthood. And then don't forget how important your role is, how important our role is as parents, as caregivers in this work. We would not expect a child to go into kindergarten solving a quadratic equation. We don't expect an infant, a toddler, or a preschooler to understand what they need in order to become resilient. So we play such a great and positive role. We can be on either side. So we want to be the positive influence in this work. And just remember that together we can all help children face that adversity. And I have just been thrilled to be with you today. And I hope that you gained something from what we did here today. And also I want you to know that this slide here, let me bounce back real quick. I am willing to send that to whoever would like to have it so that it's kind of at your fingertips to help you with the six-pack if you ever are in doubt. But please take my sincere thanks for allowing me to join you all today. And thank you, team, for having me be with you today.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Kelly before we close?
So is there a way we can get those slides sent to people? Is that possible? Can we post it somewhere maybe?
Absolutely, we can do that on our website.
You can definitely do that. You can also, my email address is here if you'd like it. I'm happy to send it directly to you, whatever is the easiest way to do that, certainly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love hearing you speak.
I feel like it's so weird because you feel like you're just talking. And you're like, it's interesting this way. We all had to learn it during COVID, right? We suddenly learned how to speak to a room of folks who are in the virtual world. But I can't tell you how grateful I am that you gave me the opportunity to share something I love so much with everyone.
Thank you so much.